Hey guys, Dan with Warpaint JKU. Let's talk all about shocks and springs, how to properly pair them, and get coilover flex like this without actually spending coilover money. Check it out. The big thing about a spring and a shock is making sure that they are paired correctly. Now, I know a lot of you guys right now are probably sitting there saying, yeah, but I bought my spring and shock as a kit. Of course it's paired correctly. I will tell you right now that it is 100% not paired correctly. I assume that lift companies do this because they don't want to make a specific shock for every single spring that they offer. So if you'll notice when you look up your shocks from whatever company lift you have, and it doesn't matter, they all do it. They'll say that this particular shock that you're looking at works for anything from a leveling kit to a 2.5 inch lift. That's not possible, okay? If you're trying to maximize the amount of travel and down travel specifically that you have in your shock, you need that shock to be perfectly matched to that spring, and there is definitely a way to do it. Let me just say first that if you're one of these people that went out and spent a bunch of money on coilovers, if you went out and spent a bunch of money on 6-pack shocks, long travel shocks, all those kinds of things, you might have wasted your money. Now, I'm not saying coilovers aren't better. They are, but they're a huge amount of money, okay? And you can get performance just like this without spending coilover money. You can do all of that on a shock and a spring, and in fact, this photo was done on short arms, not even long arms. I'm gonna blow your mind about two very, very, very common shocks, okay? Before we even get into coilovers, two very, very, very common shocks, Fox and Bilstein. They both make great shocks, okay? Bilstein is kind of a middle, upper end of the road performance, but for more of like a middle of the line, even lower end price point. I run them on my rig. They're fantastic. Fox, kind of the same deal, right? And Fox makes some real high performing shocks. They even make coilovers. Here's the thing, okay? And this is gonna blow your mind, all right? My Bilstein 27.5 inch long shock, okay, acts just like a coilover when you're talking about axle droop. And I'll explain how in a second, okay? Because 27.5 is not the length of a coilover, but I'll explain it to you. I'll explain how I got that length and how it works. The Fox shocks, they make a long travel, okay? They make a long shock. It's actually 35 inches long when it's fully extended, which everyone hears they want the 35 inch long shock. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's the one I want. I want more down travel. I want 35 inches. That's great. And it is, but here's the catch. Now, when you're thinking about shocks, the longer the shock extended, the longer it also is compressed, okay? And you need a certain amount of up travel. When you're running a big tire, you drive your Jeep on the street, heck, even if you don't, you need some up travel, okay? When you're rock crawling, you definitely want down travel. That's axle droop. That's as much as you want. That's your extended length. They're directly related. But you need up travel too, okay? And you only have so much space between the upper mount on your shock and the lower mount on your axle when it's sitting at ride height. You only have so much space. So you need to know what that compressed length is, and then you need to add about 4 to 5 inches onto that compressed length, because that's all you want. You want 4 to 5 inches of stem showing out of the top of the shock for up travel. Okay, now again, you've seen the photos. Here's another one. My Jeep completely flexes out. The tire on a 40 goes all the way up, almost hits my fender, but it doesn't, and the shock is just about bottomed out, okay? There's about a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch of shock that's not, because you don't want it completely bottomed out, and that's controlled by your bump stops. Now, that 4.5 inches of up travel that I have works on that Bilstein shock, okay? Because of its compressed length. The compressed length of that Fox shock, we'll talk about the exact details in just a second, and it's the same for all the other shocks. They're directly related, okay? The compressed length is a lot longer. And then you have to add another 4 or 5 inches onto it, and you don't have the space between your upper mount and your axle to have the 4 inches, 5 inches of up travel that you need on top of the extended length, okay? So what a lot of people do is you're already thinking it, well, shock hoops, right? Sure, you cut this bracket off, put in a new one, and raise the top. Well, the problem is when you raise the top high enough so that you do have the up travel, you no longer have all the down travel. This is the Fox shock on this side, okay? The Fox shock, their 14-inch air shock, okay, is 35 inches long when fully extended, which everyone hears that number and they're like, wow, that's amazing. And it is, it's long, okay? 35 inches from the top of this tape mark to the bottom of, or to the top of this tape mark was 35 inches. Now the Bilstein, okay, is 27 and a half. And I'll get into how I make that work. This is why a lot of people spend a lot of money and then don't really have any more performance, okay? And I'll explain it. So the Bilstein is 27 and a half. Now I can make that Bilstein act like a 2-inch longer shock, okay? And I'll explain how in a second. But so let's say 29 and a half, okay? And that's what these tape marks were. From the top tape mark here, exactly where the other one is on the Fox, all the way down to the top tape mark here is 29 and a half. Now obviously down here, top of the tape to top of the tape, you can see that this one is still shorter, even at 29 and a half. But here's the catch. If you go back a minute to what I was just talking about with the Jeep, when these two shocks are compressed, okay, and then you add on your 4 to 5 inches of up travel, you don't have enough up travel with this shock because it's so much longer. When you compress it, it's still so much longer than the other shock that's fully compressed, okay? So what you have to wind up doing is cutting out that upper mount and moving it up so that you can raise it. And usually you have to raise it 5 inches, right? That's a lot. Well, I've made a mark here, 5 inches down. So showing we're gonna lift it 5 inches to make this upper mount go up 5 inches. And look what happens at the bottom when I do that. Let's go the upper, up. Okay, we are up 5 inches. Now take a look down here at the bottom. You are a ½ inch or so away from the two lengths fully extended. There is absolutely no point in raising the upper mount 5 inches to make this shock work with enough up travel and then to have all that down travel when you're actually only getting another ½ inch of down travel. What is the point? The shock is 3 times more expensive, plus the hoop, plus the welding, plus the grinding, plus the time on all 4 corners for that much more extended length? It's not worth it. This is gonna ruin a lot of people's days, okay? Because a lot of people get convinced by Jeep shops and they get convinced by all these YouTube videos with all these guys running crazy expensive suspensions. And again, they are better, right? The upper high-end air shock probably gives you a nicer ride than my Bilstein, okay? I'm sure it does. A coilover definitely gives you a nicer ride than my Bilstein. And does it give you a little more axle drop? Yeah, a little bit, right? Doesn't give you a lot, gives you a little bit. I mean, you've seen my photos, you've seen my videos. It's not that big of a difference, okay? The way that you get this system to act like a coilover or like a long travel shock, okay, is by having the right spring and by having the right shock paired together. You can't buy them from a company out of the box because they never pair them together. Go outside to your Jeep right now. If you bought a lift kit out of the box, I don't care if it's a cheap lift kit, I don't care if it's an expensive lift kit. If it's a shock and a spring, you will have this issue, I promise you. All you need, like we said before, 4 to 5 inches of up travel. Go out, look at your Jeep, look at the stem sitting at ride height, look at the stem sticking out of the top of the shock and measure how long that stem is. I promise you it is longer than 5 inches. It's probably closer to 7 inches. Well, when you bring your tire up and you bottom it out on your bump stop, you're gonna have a lot of stem still sticking out, okay? That's wasted shock because you could never take advantage of it up and it's that much shorter than it could be when you're going down, okay? The way you fix that is with a couple of pretty cool brackets. Now here are the 2 brackets, okay? They look very, very different, but they both pretty much do the same thing. This one here, okay, as you can see in the nice gray Synergy color, is made by Synergy. This one mounts where your factory shock mounts on the axle. It mounts on the bottom. This bracket, okay, is made by, I believe, Teraflex, okay? This goes on the top of your shock, all right, and drops it 2 inches. So essentially, if you've never seen a shock before, which I assume most of you have, this is kind of what the top of your shock looks like right here. And you're gonna screw this on to the top of the shock, all right? You screw it down on, and then this just goes through and mounts with the nut and the washers and the big rubber bushings like it normally does. But that lowers it 2 inches. So use one or the other. I wouldn't use both. All right, guys. So here we are on the front driver's side of my Jeep. I know it looks like the spring is a little bowed right now, but that's because of my front axle and stretching it forward and caster angle and all that kind of stuff. It performs flawlessly. I'm not worried about it. Now, down in here, bump stops become very important when you're actually taking full advantage of your shock, okay? If you can look in here, I don't have a whole lot of up travel, okay? I got about 4.5 inches. And again, that's all you need. You've seen the photos. You don't want to bottom out your shock, okay? Your shock has seals inside of it. You will ruin your shock if you bottom it out. So you need bump stops. Now, I use the factory bump stop up here. And then down here, I have a rock crawler kit, which comes with like a bunch of hockey pucks. You can kind of see the seam there and a bunch of different length bolts. And it just bolts right down to your spring perch. And you can adjust it so that it comes up and contacts right before this bottoms out. So mine is paired really well. The reason I don't have one of those brackets down here and one of those brackets, if you look up in here, I'm not using one anymore, but that's because I'm now on a Dana 60. And the Superduty Dana 60, this mount is up so high, okay? I was able to move it and adjust it and mount it so high that it actually acts like it does have one of those brackets. It's 2 inches higher. But on a Dana 44 or a Dana 30, you would have to either put the bracket in the bottom or put that other one I just talked about up top. Now, if you can look at this is that triple rate. Look at these first few coils on this spring. They are touching. My Jeep is just essentially sitting on a jack stand, but it's basically at ride height. These coils are touching, okay? The rest of the coils under it, this is your dual rate, okay? And I forget where they put the harder spring and where they put the softer spring. I can't remember, but these are the dual rate. This is that third rate. That third rate is just a really soft spring. So when my axle fully droops, these open up and it stops the spring from falling out. Okay, so there you have it, guys. That's pretty much it. Now, I know I didn't go into the details specifically of how my Jeep is set up, and some of those photos are on my Instagram, and I'm gonna list the way my Jeep is built now with the 1 tons, as well as the way it was built on the Dana 44s, what shock and what spring I used to make that all flex the way it did in those photos. But there you have it. You can essentially maximize your suspension travel by doing the things that we talked about in this video. Now, a lot more stuff like this coming. Get on over, check out the Instagram page. There's a ton of stuff over there, live check-ins, all that kind of stuff. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. A lot of how-to stuff coming. And like I said, get out there, measure your shock, flex it out, figure out what you need to do to basically have the right amount of up travel and not be wasting any of that stem, and then convert it into the down travel, and you're gonna be super happy with it. Anyway, guys, stay tuned for more stuff. It's on the way. Check it all out.